Good morning, everyone. Today is an auspicious day. We've just finished with Shivaratri, and we celebrated Vivekananda's birthday in the first weekend of February. And now we have Sri Ramakrishna's birthday celebration coming up next Sunday. His actual birthday is 3 days after Shivaratri. So it seemed fitting that the topic for today's talk is Ramakrishna is the Sutra, Vivekananda is the commentary. What does that mean? Swami Brahmananda once said, Sri Ramakrishna was revealed to the world at large through Swamiji. Know that their words and teachings are not different. Sri Ramakrishna was too great for the average mind to grasp. It was Swami Vivekananda who made his life and teachings understandable to all. That's a profound truth. Vivekananda once said to Haramohan Mitra, shelves of philosophical books can be written on each single sentence spoken by the master. Haramohan Mitra was surprised. Is that so? He said. We, however, don't find so deep a meaning in his words. Will you please explain to me any of his utterances in that manner? Vivekananda, in his fashion, said, you would have understood it had you the brains. Take any saying of the master, and I shall prove my statement. His friend said, all right, please explain the story of the elephant god and the Mohut god related by the master to illustrate his instruction on seeing God in all beings. You're all familiar with that parable. In a forest, there lived a holy man, goes the parable, who had many disciples. And one day he taught them to see God in all beings, and knowing this, to bow low before them all. So this disciple, one, went to the forest to gather wood for the sacrificial fire. And suddenly he heard an outcry, get out of the way, a mad elephant is coming. All but the disciple of the holy man took to their heels. He reasoned that the elephant was also God in another form. Then why should he run away from it? He stood still, bowed before the elephant, and began to sing its praises. The mahout of the elephant was shouting, run away, run away. But the disciple didn't move. The animal seized him with its trunk, cast him to one side, and went on its way. And so hurt and bruised, the disciple lay unconscious on the ground. Hearing what had happened, his teacher and his brother disciples rushed to him and carried him to the hermitage. And with the help of some medicines, he soon regained consciousness. Someone asked him, you knew the elephant was coming. Why didn't you run out of the way? But, he said, the unconscious man who became conscious, our teacher has told us that God himself has taken all these forms of animals as well as men. Therefore, thinking it was only the elephant god that was coming, I didn't run away. At this, the teacher said, yes, my child, it is true that the elephant god was coming, but the Mahout god forbade you to stay. Since all are manifestations of God, why didn't you trust the Mahout's words? You should have heeded the words of the Mahout God. So Swami Vivekananda at once began explaining the commentary. For 3 days, he explained the controversy over the doctrines of free will and predestination, the doctrines of the personal effort and God's will among the scholars of both East and West. How in simple language, this Ramakrishna parable provided a wonderful solution to all the controversies, philosophical. Sri Ramakrishna's teaching is that God dwells in all beings, but you may be intimate only with the good people, and you must keep away from the evil-minded. This is Vivekananda. God is even in the tiger, but you cannot embrace the tiger on that account. He goes on, you may say, why run away from a tiger, which is also a manifestation of God? But the answer to that is this. Those who tell you to run away are also manifestations of God. And why shouldn't you listen to them? Practical Vedanta. So it took a spiritual giant with a divine mandate to assimilate Sri Ramakrishna's life and teachings, and through his lectures, his classes, his letters, and yes, his poetry, to make them accessible to the world. Ramakrishna himself understood Vivekananda's capacity. Upon Naran's first visit to Dakshineshwar, and you all know the story, Sri Ramakrishna immediately took him into a separate room. And he said to him, you've come at last. How I yearn to unburden my mind to one who can appreciate my innermost experience. Swami Brahmananda, another Ishvarakoti, and there were 6 Ishvarakotis, ever free souls, in the Ramakrishna incarnation, and Vivekananda was one of them. He said Naran was to become infused with the mind of Sri Ramakrishna and all that that means, infused with Sri Ramakrishna's mind. So then we read Naran's second visit. Sri Ramakrishna lost no time imparting his vast universal realm of the avatar to his disciple. He touched Naran. And he later described Naran. The touch at once gave rise to a novel experience within me. With my eyes open, I saw that the walls and everything in the room whirled rapidly and vanished into naught. And the whole universe, together with my individuality, was about to merge in an all-encompassing, mysterious void. I was terribly frightened and thought that I was facing death, for the loss of individuality meant nothing short of that. Unable to control myself, I cried out, "What is it that you're doing to me? I have my parents at home." Ramakrishna laughed and, stroking my chest, said, "All right, let it rest now. Everything will come in time." And then we have Naran's third visit. At that time, Sri Ramakrishna went into a trance and again touched him. And Naran lost all outward consciousness. When he returned to normal consciousness, Ramakrishna was stroking his chest, and he later explained to others. I put several questions to Naran while he was in that state. I asked him about his antecedents and where he lived, his mission in this world, and the duration of his mortal life. He dived deep into himself and gave fitting answers to my questions. They only confirmed what I had seen and inferred about him. Those things shall be a secret. But I came to know that he was a sage who had attained perfection, a past master in meditation, and that the day he knew his real nature, he would give up his body through yoga by an act of will. Sri Ramakrishna compared Naran to others. He said, Narendra belongs to a very high plane, the realm of the absolute. So many devotees come here, but there is not one like him. Every now and then I take stock of the devotees. I find that some are like lotuses with 10 petals, some like lotuses with 16 petals, some like those with 100 petals, but among lotuses, Narendra is 1,000-petaled lotus. Sri Ramakrishna gave Vivekananda the divine mandate to be his voice, and he transmitted the experience of Vijnana to him. On January 1st, 1886, you all know Kalpatara Day, Sri Ramakrishna bestowed illumination on lay devotees at Kasipur. The monks were there, standing, observing from the second story of the Kasipur garden house, but they knew it was not for them. Then later, Naran came to Sri Ramakrishna and said, all others had their realization. Please give me something. All have succeeded. Shall I alone remain unsatisfied? Well, this is hyperbole. Naran came as a young lad to Dakshineshwar, and he was gifted with many experiences. But Sri Ramakrishna said to him, this was at that time, settle your family affairs, and then come to me. You will get everything. What do you want? Naran said, it's my desire to remain absorbed in samadhi continually for 3 or 4 days, only once in a while coming down to the sense plane to eat a little food. Sri Ramakrishna scolded him. You are a small-minded person. There is a state higher even than that. All that exists art thou. It is you who sing that song. You will attain a higher state than samadhi. That is the difference between jnana and vijnana. Of course, total oneness is the highest possible state. But as Swami Swahananda once explained to me, the state of vijnana is a higher achievement. And it's only for those who are world teachers. In Kasipur one evening, meditating, Naran felt a light at the back of the head, like a torchlight, playing there. It became more and more brilliant, larger and larger, until it seemed to burst. The mind merged in it, the realm of the absolute. His beautiful poem, A Hymn of Samadhi, gives a hint of that experience. When I was working on volume 9 of the complete works with Bellarmine, Swami Sarvagatananda came to my study in Santa Barbara Convent, and he said, you know, the lectures Vivekananda gave to the world, his letters he gave to his intimate disciples, but his poetry he gave to his own soul. Don't touch a word from his poems. He was bathed in an ineffable peace, and his heart overflowed with ecstasy. He realized that the absolute of Vedanta alone could reconcile all philosophies. So it was in that state. Sri Ramakrishna then said, Mother has shown you everything. Just as a treasure is locked up in a box, so will this realization be locked up, and the key shall remain within me. You have work to do. When you have finished my work, the treasure box will be unlocked again, and you will know everything then, as you did just now. Sri Ramakrishna further issued divine mandates. Sometime before his passing, Sri Ramakrishna told Naran, my siddhis, my powers, will manifest through you in time. As a world teacher, Vivekananda would be empowered to turn many people in India, Europe, Asia, and America to spiritual life. Narayan was also called to Sri Ramakrishna's bedside, and Ramakrishna wrote on a piece of paper, "Narendra will teach others." When Narayan read it, he said, "I won't do that." And Sri Ramakrishna replied, "You shall have to do it." Then later, Sri Ramakrishna called Narayan to his bedside and, looking steadfastly at him, entered into deep meditation. And Narayan in turn felt a subtle force resembling an electric shock entering his body, and he lost outer consciousness. Afterwards, Sri Ramakrishna said, "O Narayan, today I have given you my all. By the force of the power transmitted by me, great things will be done by you. Only after that will you go from whence you came." What were Vivekananda's qualifications as Sri Ramakrishna's commentator? He was pre-qualified. He entered this world in a different way from ordinary beings. He entered from the realm of the seven sages. He received the highest samadhi, nirvikalpa, along with Sri Ramakrishna's realizations that came from that experience. He realized the why behind Sri Ramakrishna's harmony of religions. And he received the highest spiritual experience of Vijnana, which bestowed upon him a unique capacity as a world teacher. That is why when we read his words, they make us sit up straight. There's something that comes off the pages that enters the heart. He would live always in Brahman while serving humanity in the world. Girish Ghosh said, "I call ignorant anyone who thinks Swami Vivekananda is separate or different from Sri Ramakrishna." Why? One morning, Narayan went to Girish Ghosh's house. It's there in Kolkata. It's a monument, a Calcutta monument. And he sat, Girish, leaning against a wall, absorbed in deep thought. No body consciousness or awareness of the external world. And Girish Ghosh said, "I was dumbfounded by the expression on his face." After a brief silence, he said, "JC, I won't be able to realize God. I have renounced everything and forgotten everything. But I cannot forget that mad Brahmin of Dakshineshwar. He is my obstacle." Vivekananda said, "I could not understand his high spiritual state. So I kept quiet." This is Girish Ghosh saying that. Swami Vivekananda was consumed with the same one-pointed devotion as Sri Ramakrishna. When Todapuri taught the secret of the non-dual path, Sri Ramakrishna couldn't efface the form of the Divine Mother, radiant with pure consciousness from his own inner realm, until Todapuri pierced his forehead with a broken glass and told him to meditate on that point. The result? In February 1897, Vivekananda went to Pashupati Basu's house, where Girish Ghosh and direct disciples received him. And he said, "JC, I carried your Thakur to the other side of the ocean. I carried your Thakur." What was the meaning of that? In February 1893 in Madras, after meditating on Cape Comoran's rock for 3 days and 3 nights, he had and received the mission, the insight of his mission in India unfolding. Swami Vivekananda yearned for the sign, the vision, the direct command, and prayed to Mother and the Master for their guidance. Several days later, as he lay half asleep one night, the command came in a symbolic dream. Vivekananda saw Sri Ramakrishna walking from the seashore into the waters of the ocean and beckoning him to follow with the order, go, impressed on Vivekananda's mind. This was the start. And then in the West, divine guidance. He was protected against vilifiers, Mr. Mazumdar, Christian missionaries. And at a dinner in Detroit, Vivekananda was about to sip a cup of coffee, and Sri Ramakrishna appeared in vision and said, "Don't drink, that is poison." He heard a voice within, and that was what allowed him to give 12 to 14 lectures a week in America. He would be exhausted intellectually and would say to himself, "What is to be done? What shall I say in my lecture tomorrow?" And then in the dead of night, a voice called out the thoughts he was to speak the next day. This is all in his 2-volume biography. It came from a long distance down a great avenue, and it drew nearer and nearer, as if someone was delivering a lecture alongside him as he lay on his bed listening. Or there would be two voices arguing before him, discussing subjects he repeated the next day from the pulpit, sometimes ideas he had never heard of before. What is the meaning of this? Vivekananda explained it as manifestations of the wider powers of the mind, and Sri Ramakrishna's promise that my siddhis, my powers, will manifest through you in time. It is also explained as a subjective automatic workings of the mind. When we possess vague forms of thought, the mind naturally works to enlarge them and uses its creative faculties to present them. Vivekananda explained in this way that the rishis had such revelations in composing the Upanishads, and he referred to them as inspirations. Once his American hostess said to him, "Swami, with whom were you talking loudly and enthusiastically last night?" Vivekananda only smiled. To his close disciples, he said, "These experiences revealed powers, potentialities of the self, nothing miraculous." Swami Vivekananda's heart and mind was nothing but Sri Ramakrishna. He lived, moved, and had his being in Sri Ramakrishna. He said, "I see a greater power than man or God or devil at my back." Vivekananda was the recipient of Sri Ramakrishna's spiritual experiences. He was established in the realms wherein Sri Ramakrishna dwelt, the Ramakrishna Loka, a vast cauldron from which he drew his words, voiced his message. Lillian Montgomery was a woman who attended several of Vivekananda's talks in New York, and she met with Swami Pavitrananda, who was longtime former head of the Vedanta Center Vedanta Society in New York on the West Side. And he taped Lillian Montgomery's reminiscences of what she saw, what she heard, and what she felt. And I believe those recordings are on our Vedanta Society of Southern California website in the resources, and they're really something to listen to. She said it was just as if his form was carved out of an ocean of light, as it were, and somehow that light concentrated and just poured through the words he was speaking. I am an instrument, and he is the operator. Through this instrument, he is awakening the spiritual consciousness in thousands of hearts in this far-off country. When I was in Portland many years ago with Swami Asheshanandaji, his close attendant, Mrs. Vera Edwards, said her great aunt happened to be in an apartment building, and she looked down on the street and saw Vivekananda. And she said, once you saw him, you could never forget him. Vivekananda was a world teacher. He had a mission. He wanted to be a voice without a form. Whose voice? Sri Ramakrishna's. Injected his own consciousness, his own realizations into Narayan's heart. So now let's go to the sutras. What are the Ramakrishna Sutras? I'll give you just a few. The harmony of religion is a major tenet of Vedanta. Sri Ramakrishna's teachings was, as many people, so many paths. He himself practiced the various conflicting Hindu sects, the paths of dualism, non-dualism, qualified non-dualism. He practiced Islam. He had the vision of Christ. He honored the Sikh and Jain gurus. He was a householder and a monk. He synthesized bhakti and jnana, contemplation and practical Vedanta in action. Now we come to Vivekananda's 4 yogas. These 4 yogas represent the 4 aspects of our psychophysical being: emotional, active, contemplative, intellectual. This is how he synthesized Vivekananda's sutras. So these yoga practices are fitted to each aspirant. They encompass the dimension of our being. They synthesize and harmonize a holistic approach to God. Harmonize. We can allow one yoga to dominate. It depends on our temperament, whether we're devotional, logical, active, contemplative, and our spiritual disposition, whether we're a dualist, qualified non-dualist, or a non-dualist, or sometimes a non-dualist, sometimes a dualist. A Jew may be more drawn toward the monistic Jnana Yoga path, Raja Yoga, and Karma Yoga, whereas a Catholic may be more drawn towards Bhakti Yoga, Raja Yoga, and Karma Yoga. And believe me, we have Christians and Jews in our Vedantic tradition. These 4 yogas are universal in application as a means to attain the ultimate reality in any religious tradition. We also have Sufis in our tradition as well. I remember the day Swami Pravrajika initiated one Muslim girl. She was maybe 20 years old, and he was so proud. That was way back in 1971, 72. And now others have. In fact, in our order, we have several Muslim uh, by birth swamis. So these 4 yogas Bhakti yoga, we'll start with that, is appeals to our emotional nature, the path of devotion, to seek union with God through prayer and worship. Karma yoga appeals to our active nature. It's a path of action. We seek freedom in the midst of a day-to-day life, work as worship, in a dedicated, unselfish, detached spirit. Then we have Raja Yoga. It's not called yoga, it's called Raja Yoga because yoga itself is a dualistic system, but Raja Yoga comes from the Tantric tradition. It's non-dualistic. It appeals to our contemplative nature, and we draw on the Yoga Sutras because it's the path of psychic control, which Patanjali so beautifully delineates, to seek to perfect the mind as an instrument of clear insight into truth, as a cleansed mirror reflects that which is, to make the mind as a cleansed mirror. Then Jnana Yoga. It appeals to our intellectual nature, the path of knowledge, to seek self-knowledge, oneness of the individual self with the infinite reality. What are the qualifiers? The last three yogas are not based on a belief in a personal God, just self-knowledge. God as a person in all the yogas except the last. Vedanta is not dependent on ritual, mythology. It is the richest tradition of both for those are temperamentally akin and desire it. So these four yogas are universal in application according to our temperament, our spiritual disposition, our religious choice. Each yoga is based on core teachings coming from Sri Ramakrishna. Bhakti yoga. Sri Ramakrishna said, you know the story of the man who asked his guru how God can be realized. The guru said to him, come with me. I shall show you how one can realize God. Saying this, he took the disciple to a lake and held his head under the water. After a short time, he released the disciple and asked him, how did you feel? I was dying for a breath of air, said the disciple. And the teacher said, when the soul longs and yearns for God like that, then you will know that you do not have long to wait for his vision. That's the secret. Sri Ramakrishna said, in the Kali Yuga, the life of a man depends on food. The path of devotion prescribed by Narada is the best for this age. Then Raja Yoga. Sri Ramakrishna said the aim of Raja Yoga is the attainment of devotion, ecstatic love, knowledge, and renunciation. Vivekananda explained the dynamics of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, the powerful combination of Vedanta and Tantra, philosophy and practice. Third, Karma Yoga. Sri Ramakrishna was asked in 1884 at Dakshineshwar, asked by devotees to explain the Vaishnava doctrine. And he said, practice love of God, compassion for all beings, service of devotees. And suddenly he uttered compassion for all beings and went into samadhi. How absurd, he said, not compassion, but service to all. Recognize all as manifestations of God. Serve them as such. Vivekananda's response, Advaita Vedanta. The vision behind Sri Ramakrishna's words, the philosophy behind Karma Yoga. He said, what? And the only one who recognized those words, what a wonderful light I have discovered in those words of the master. I have understood that the ideal of Vedanta lived by the recluse outside the pale of society can be practiced even at home and applied to all aspects of daily life. Serving man, knowing him to be the manifestation of God, purifies the heart, and in a short time, the aspirant who does this realizes that he is part of God, existence, knowledge, bliss absolute. My teacher once said, Swami Pravrajika, who was a disciple of Swami Brahmananda, one day Swami Premananda was listening to a class on Karma Yoga in Benares and said, this Karma Yoga of Swamiji is Jnana Yoga. Sri Krishna and Vivekananda both established Karma Yoga not simply as a purifier of the mind, but a means to attain the highest realization. As Krishna states in the Gita, chapter 5, verse 4, the yoga of action, say the ignorant, is different from the yoga of the knowledge of Brahman. The wise see knowledge and action as one. They see truly. Then fourth, Jnana Yoga. Sri Ramakrishna noticed Hari, the future Swami Turiyananda, used to come to Sri Ramakrishna, and then he would take up Vedanta and rarely visit the master. He would spend days and nights in study, discussion, reasoning, and reading. One day at Dakshineshwar, Sri Ramakrishna said, I hear that you are studying and discussing Vedanta philosophy. That is good, of course. But tell me, what does Vedanta teach? Is it not that Brahman alone is real and the world unreal? Isn't that its substance? Or does it say something else? This opened Hari's eyes to jnana as this realization alone. Sri Ramakrishna synthesized two seemingly opposing paths. Perfect knowledge and perfect bhakti are one and the same. Sri Ramakrishna's realization of the harmony of religions is the experience of non-dualism, nirvikalpa samadhi, the underlying thread tying together the garland of Hinduism's conflicting sects and the world's major religious traditions. Vivekananda, not only Jnana Yoga, but his Parliament of Religions lectures launched the global interfaith movement. He is considered the pioneer of interfaith dialogue. I heard from Father Thomas Keating, who established the Snowmass dialogues. He established those dialogues because, in the 1970s, he said others from Vedanta, Buddhism, Sufism, they're having experiences, but our young monks are not. We need to enter into dialogue with them. His Snowmass conferences were famous. The unity of all existence. Vivekananda said that plan alone is practical, which does not destroy the individuality of any man in religion, and at the same time shows him a point of union with all others. At the Parliament, he galvanized Americans by saying, do I wish that a Christian would become a Hindu? God forbid. Do I wish that the Hindu or Buddhist would become Christian? God forbid. But each must assimilate the spirit of the others and yet preserve his individuality and grow according to his own law of growth. He then said in his ideal of a universal religion, if it be true that God is the center of all religions and that each of us is moving towards him along one of those radii, then it is certain that all of us must reach that center. And at the center, where all radii meet, all our differences will cease. Now we come back to the parable of the Mahut god. Swami Vivekananda's commentary was free will versus predestination, self-effort versus God's will. It was also that free will is a misnomer, so long as we remain bound, subject to the law of karma. He said, everything that we know or can possibly know must be subject to causation, and that which obeys the law of causation cannot be free. It is acted upon by other agents and becomes a cause in its turn. So real freedom, real freedom of will comes with the knowledge of the Atman. Vivekananda tells us the goal of mankind is knowledge. How does knowledge come? Through karmas and their effect on our character. Through karmas and their effect on our character. He explains, after a time, man finds that it is not happiness, but knowledge towards which he is going, and that both pleasure and pain are great teachers, and that he learns as much from evil as from good. It goes on, as pleasure and pain pass before his soul, they have upon it different pictures. And the result of these combined impressions is what is called a man's character. Good and evil have an equal share in molding character, and in some instances, misery is a greater teacher than happiness. Isn't it true? We learn from the troubles that we go through. So how does higher knowledge unfold? It unfolds from within. Vivekananda tells us all knowledge, therefore secular or spiritual, is in the human mind. In many cases, it is not discovered but remains covered. And when the covering is being slowly taken off, we say, we are learning. And the advance of knowledge is made by the advance of this process of uncovering. He says the man from whom this veil is being lifted is the more knowing man. The man upon whom it lies thick is ignorant, and the man from whom it has entirely gone is all-knowing, omniscient. This was one of his commentaries on the Mahut God, that parable. The young man learned from his mistake. Secular knowledge is information. Spiritual knowledge is insight. How can we leap from secular to spiritual knowledge then? From the relative to the transcendental realm, from the lower self to the higher self. That's what we want. Thus, move from experience of self-effort to God's will or divine grace. Vivekananda tells us, karma in its effect on character is the most tremendous power that man has to deal with. Man is, as it were, a center and is attracting all the powers of the universe toward himself. And in this center is fusing them and all, and again sending them off in a big current. Such a center is the real man, the almighty, the omniscient, and he draws the whole universe towards him, good and bad, misery and happiness, all are running towards him and clinging round him, and out of them he fashions the mighty stream of tendency called character and throws it outwards. As he has the power of drawing in anything, so has he the power of throwing it out. So what does this mean? When we dwell on the surface within the relative world, this is called samsara, life, death, and rebirth. We attract karmas, good and bad. The more we deep dive below the surface life and try to surrender to God and dwell in God, the more we sidestep this ego, which is butted around by the law of karma, and defer to the higher self, defer to God's will. And with this is a movement away from the ego. And when this happens, we begin to feel God within, drawing all things to us. That's an actual experience. Past karmas have tethered us to a pole, as it were, but we're free to develop ourselves within the radius of that pole. And this was the forest world where the disciple dwelt. He came from his guru's hermitage and met with the elephant god. Vivekananda tells us, and this continues his commentary on that parable, if what we are now has been the result of our own past actions, it certainly follows that whatever we wish to be in the future can be produced by our present actions. So we have to know how to act. So the stage is set. The disciple received the teaching from the guru. God is manifest in all, now enters the mad elephant. The disciple is tethered to the pole of the forest, and the radius is inhabited by his guru, the mad elephant, and the mahout crying, "Run." How did the disciple act? He stayed and was dashed to the ground. He almost died. Vivekananda said, "You must remember that all work is simply to bring out the power of the mind, which is already there, to wake up the soul. The power is inside every man, so is knowing. The different works are like blows to bring them out, to cause these giants to wake up." So this blow came from the mad elephant. Then came the knowing, the guru's instruction. Yes, all are manifestations of God. But why didn't you trust the mahout God who warned you to run? So through the lesson of experience, karma, the disciple was able to assimilate a higher truth, how to practice Vedanta while living in the world and advance in wisdom. Mind you, Vivekananda gave his commentary for 3 days on this parable to Harimohan Mitra, who challenged him. So in conclusion, the 4 yogas in the parable of the Mahout God are examples of Sri Ramakrishna's teaching of unity in diversity. The parable of the Mahout God, Sri Ramakrishna reveals the truth. God is manifest in all. Then practical Vedanta, the wisdom of unity in diversity, the ability to live in harmony with the level of reality that we experience. Then the 4 yogas, delineated 4 unique paths that lead us to the ultimate reality and the underlying harmony of all religious diversity. The doctrine that the many and the one are the same reality, perceived by the mind at different times and in different places and in different attitudes, according to Sister Nivedita in her introduction to the complete works. To study Vivekananda's works, and I encourage you all to study his works, at least the 4 yogas. They are exhilarating and awe-inspiring explorations of Sri Ramakrishna's realizations and spiritual realms. Swami Brahmananda said, "Study Swamiji's works carefully, for unless you understand his teachings, it is useless to try to understand Sri Ramakrishna. Read and study the teachings of both, and at the same time, devote yourself to the practice of japam and meditation. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.